Alright, so last week's video actually did pretty well, and honestly, the only difference I can see from that video to videos I've done previously is that it was the first video that I wore my new glasses. So I guess I'm not taking them off anymore. Alright, but in this week's video I want to highlight the 7 most common mistakes that I see photographers make and how you can avoid doing them. But make sure to hang around because I'm also going to show you how you can get 50% off this typewriter text effect that you see on screen right now for Adobe Premiere Pro. But let's jump into it. And the first really common mistake that I see photographers make is that their images are just overly cluttered. Take this image here for example. Here you can see the before and the after. And now also take a look at how it looks after I have decluttered the image. I'm just removing all different small spots that I don't think place any purpose whatsoever in this image. It just takes away, or it just distracts the viewers from what's really important. When you're out photographing, try to think about not only your composition and light and all of that stuff that you need to think about as a photographer, but also try to think about what you can keep outside of the frame, what you don't need to have in it. And it's always better to try to remove as much as possible before rather than doing it in the editing. But some things you just can't remove when you're out. Some things are just there. But just try to keep in mind that if you can remove some objects that doesn't really make sense for your image, then just remove them. And that is especially if it is high contrast items, because they are just going to pop out of your image. So if you have a bright image, like a dark black rock or a spot on the frame or something like that, it's going to be super visible. And the viewer's attention is automatically going to be towards those high contrast spots without them even thinking about it. So by just removing them, you're going to get a much better image. And now for mistake number 2, and that is being impatient. And this one honestly hits a little bit too close to home for me. I definitely feel guilty of being a little bit too impatient quite often. But it is easy to get caught in just trying to get those banger shots, and yeah, you just want to go out, shoot the shot, get back home. But when it comes to photography, especially if you're shooting landscapes and nature, like 50% of the work is just waiting for the right moment. So if you don't have the perfect conditions, the image is not going to be as good as you want it to be. That's just how easy it is. And that is honestly quite a good exercise, I guess, as well. And that is to go out to a location and go to the same location multiple different times at drastically different weather conditions and times of day, all of that, and see how that will affect your image. So if you are unsure, I would highly recommend try to visit the same location over and over again. I personally have one of those locations that I just can't seem to beat or find the perfect timing when I'm there. I think I will make a video on that, but I'm pretty sure if you're a viewer of this channel, you know which one I mean. It is this one here. And it is one that I just continue to come back to. And it's really interesting to come back to the same location over and over again. But I'm making a video on that for sure. For mistake number 3, this is one that you probably have heard about, and it is overexposing your images. And me personally, I would rather underexpose my images just a little bit rather than overexposing them. And that is because I think it is much easier to save the information that is stored in the shadows rather than the ones that are in the highlights. I don't know if this is technically correct, but from my own personal experience, I've found it to be much easier to save a little bit underexposed image in editing rather than an overexposed one. And I think it looks a little bit better. But I guess this mistake is more rather than overexposing your image. I see a lot of overexposed images, but it's more like expose your images correctly, I guess. And when it comes to photography, it comes down to the exposure triangle, I guess. So you need to learn the manual settings of your camera. So you have your aperture, your shutter speed, and your ISO as your main 3 exposure dials. So learn your manual settings, and then you also could learn about techniques like exposure bracketing, which is where you take multiple different shots at different exposures, then you combine all of those images in editing so that you get an image that have information both in the highlights and in the shadows. But do expose your images correctly, because an incorrectly exposed image just looks really unprofessional. Next up, don't forget to clean your lens. I mean, this should be a super obvious one, and I shouldn't really need to be telling you this, but clean your lens and clean your sensor, because having those black dust spots is also such a just amateur move. So make sure that you have clean lenses and clean sensors, because yeah, just do it. And the next mistake that I see a lot of photographers make is that their images are not sharp. And you might think that it is all down to your editing or your camera and things like that, but that is not true. There are, in my opinion, two different main reasons why your images might not be as sharp as you want them to be. Number one, you missed focus, and that happens, it sucks, but try to make sure that you always focus correctly. I guess I realized there are like three main things why your images might not be as sharp as you want them to be. But first, you missed focus. Number two, you have a shutter speed that is too slow. So shutter speed is how long you are exposing your image, so for how long the image is being taken. And if the shutter speed is very long, then while you're taking the image and you're holding the camera, you might shake your hands a little bit. And if you do that while the shutter is open, that is going to result in an image that isn't that sharp. So there is this rule of thumb that you should use a shutter speed that is at least twice the focal length you're using on your lens. So if you're using a 50mm lens, then you should use at least a shutter speed of 1/100th of a second. And that is for handheld. But if you want to make sure that it is really sharp, you can also crank up the shutter speed a little bit more as well. But just keep that in mind. So if you have a 50mm, don't go under 1/100th of a second. And for the third one that I just came up with is that you are using an aperture that is too shallow. I know it looks nice with a shallow depth of field and you wanna just have the aperture at your lowest, but that can also make your images not look quite as sharp. And that is because if you have a really low aperture, sometimes, and if you're shooting, like for example, faces, then the nose or the eyes might be in focus, but like the ears and the back of the head might be out of focus. And that is because the depth of field is so shallow that only parts of the face is in focus. And that is just also going to make the image not look quite fully that sharp. So try to avoid that and use the correct settings and make sure that all of your images are sharp. Alright, I hope you are enjoying this video. I said that I was going to give you 50% off this typewriter text effect, and I am, if you use the code, let's say 7 mistakes. Then, in one word, let's do one word, it will be a bit easier. Another mistake that I see a lot of beginner photographers make is that they don't take enough images. We are not living in the 50s, 60s or 70s anymore. We have digital cameras and we can shoot a lot more images than we could when we used film rolls and film cameras. Personally, I don't really agree with people saying that, oh, I don't want to waste images, or I don't need it, or it doesn't make sense to shoot so many images. It does, in my opinion, it really, really does. Why wouldn't I just press and shoot as much as possible to make sure that I capture that perfect moment? Of course, it depends on the shoot, and if you have time, you can set up and perfect your images, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't shoot during the process as well, because some of the images that you take in the beginning might actually end up being really, really good images. So always make sure to shoot as much as you possibly can. I personally would rather sit and just click through the images in Lightroom, but make sure that I actually capture that perfect moment. Because it would suck to come home from a shoot and realize that, I wish I had shot that shot, or if I wish that I would have used burst instead so that I would have gotten the exact moment that I wanted. So in my opinion, shoot as much as you possibly can. We have memory cards that are really large. They aren't that expensive. So yeah, just shoot more. That's 6. I think that was 6. Let's do one more. All right, and the last mistake that I see is photographers not enjoying the process of doing photography. I see so many people that are just too focused on the end result and not enjoying the process. And at the end of the day, what does it really matter how good your images are? To some degree, yes, but to me, at least personally, the most important thing is the process of doing it. I love going out shooting photos. I love going out meeting people and shooting with other photographers and all the experiences that I have had. And that image back on the wall there, why I love having it on the wall is not only because I think it's a nice image, I do, but also because it was a day 2-3 years ago when me, one of my best friends, had awesome photography day. We had a helicopter ride over the archipelago here in Gothenburg. We didn't know if we were going to be able to take off because it had snowed, it was a lot of fog, a lot of parameters. Is that how you say it? I think so. That just made it unsure if we were going to be able to take off. We sat there, waited, and we were able to take off. We got some of our best images, had a great time, and that image just represents the whole journey throughout that day. What an amazing experience we had. The biggest mistake I see photographers make is not enjoying the process, just focusing on the end result and comparing the end result with others. And comparison is the thief of joy. You have all heard this saying, and I personally think it is very true. So to finish off this video, I just want to say, try to enjoy the process as much as possible, because that is truly what actually matters. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you guys in the next one, hopefully. See you. Bye.